Hello and welcome to the Car Care channel. So in today's video, I'm going to show you guys how to replace the transmission fluid on the sealed transmission on the Toyota trucks, the 4Runner, Tacoma, Tundra, Sequoia, Land Cruiser, and on the Lexus side, the trucks as well. But before we get started, if you're new to the channel, welcome. Consider subscribing to the channel. Check out some of my other videos. If you're a returning subscriber, well, thank you so much for watching another one of my videos. And without further ado, let's get to work. A small overview before we get started. Let's clarify some things and some questions I got from my previous sealed transmission video. First off, the replacement interval. You will read in the owner's manual that this is a lifetime fluid, but what is this lifetime? 5-10 years? We wouldn't want to stick around to find out. So your replacement interval, the safe replacement interval, is going to be 60,000 miles or 6 years, whichever comes first. Drain and fill, a single drain and fill. You do not need to do 3 drain and fills until you get red fluid. WS fluid is typically dark in its color and it immediately changes to dark fluid. So make sure you're not doing 3 drain and fills one after one. Another question that always comes up is the transmission filter. You do not need to service the filter as long as you are replacing the fluid on time. There's no need to service the filter. You're welcome to do that, but make sure you keep everything clean when you take the pan down. In this video, we're going to cover a drain and fill. Many folks have asked about a flush. A flush is okay as long as it's followed by a fluid level check. It should be fine. If your car has too many miles, let's say you're at 100,000 miles and you're doing this for the first time, a flush is not a good idea. In that case, just do a drain and fill and you're good to go. Having said that, folks, always use the original fluid. Yes, some other fluids might work, might not, but you're taking chances with a very expensive part. I recommend you use the original fluid and it will work 100% with your transmission for the best protection. Having said that, let's go drain the fluid and we'll check the fluid afterwards. Alright, so first thing, we're going to drain the fluid. On all these transmissions, you're going to have 2 plugs at the bottom of the transmission. One of them is a drain and one of them is a standpipe, which we will use to check the fluid level. First thing we want to do is, before you start all this, is actually locate the fill plug, take it off. That's just to make sure that you can fill the transmission. The fill plug is a 24mm bolt on the side of the transmission. Towards the end of it, some of them will be in a different location, but look for a 24mm plug. Very hard to see on camera. I know I'm pointing my finger at it, but it is on the side. That's going to be your fill plug. Make sure you take that out before you drain the fluid. In case you have issues taking it out, it's a 24mm. Let's go ahead and take that out. Here's how that plug looks like up close. Now let's go drain the fluid. So let's start by draining the fluid. This is usually a 14mm bolt that you take out, the drain plug, and then the standpipe, which we're going to use later for the fluid level, is going to be a 5mm hex. I usually use a graduated pan so you can measure how much fluid you took out, because we're going to use this to make life easier when you add the fluid. So let's go ahead and drain the fluid. We're going to wait for the fluid to drain all the way until there's barely drops coming out, so we can make sure we get as much fluid out as possible. A small note while the fluid is draining. If you have a Land Cruiser or an LX 570, those will not have the 2 plugs. They will only have one. On any of these models, when you have one plug only, it's a 5mm hex. You're going to take that plug down and then you're going to reinsert your 5mm hex back in the hole and unscrew the standpipe or the overflow pipe. This is similar to your front wheel drive, like normal, Camry, Avalon, all the other ones. Just some of them had the separate drain plug, some of them only had the one. So if you see that, just take the overflow pipe and then when you're done, install it until it stops. Do not use the ratchet, just install it by hand until it stops, then you're done. Now let's start with the fluid filling procedure and then we'll go into checking the fluid level. Alright, so we drained about just over 3 quarts, let's call it 3 quarts here. When we go ahead and add more fluid to it, we're going to add a little bit of extra because when we check the fluid level, we want to be on the overfilled side, not on the underfilled, because we have a very small window to check the fluid level. You'll find out more when we talk about the actual fluid level full. But now let me go ahead and fill it. You have multiple ways to do this. You can use a hand pump. You can use any method you want. I have some recommendations in my Amazon affiliate store for fluid pumps. But let me go ahead and fill the fluid. We're going to add 3.5 quarts, and then we'll talk about the fluid level adjustment. And the torque specs for these bolts are 15 foot-pounds for the drain plug and the overflow plug. For the fill plug, it's going to be 29 foot-pounds. Always use new gaskets. Some of them on the fill plug will have an O-ring. Just replace that O-ring and life is good. So now that we're done adding the fluid, this is the most crucial part of this operation. If you just dump the same amount of fluid that you took out and you call it a day, you're really risking it. Many people have said, many people have done it that way, and you could have been fine, that's okay. But we're about doing jobs right, not about doing the job of what's convenient and easy. You have to do this job to its completion. You have to do it right. This is your transmission. It costs a small fortune if you get the fluid level wrong. So there are mainly 3 methods to do this. The first one and the easiest one is just use a scan tool that can read the temperature. Most of these transmissions are going to be somewhere between 95 degrees. Some of them will go as high as 120. This is a range where you want to pull that second plug and adjust the fluid level. That second plug has a standpipe, and that's how you're going to measure the fluid level. Fluid gets too hot, it expands too much. Now you're going to get an incorrect reading. Fluid is too cold, it's shrunk down, and it's less than it's supposed to be, and now you're going to overfill it. So this is how this is going to work. First method is scan tool, easiest one. Second method, which is a method I do not recommend you use because I've actually found that it's highly inaccurate. I'm going to show you. You can use a temp gun to measure the temperature on the oil pan. But what I've found is, as you can see here, here's the actual live temperature from the scan tool. We're nowhere near as what the temp gun is reading right here. You see what I'm talking about here? And you can't compensate it, oh, there's a 10-degree difference or whatever the case may be. It's not accurate. You got to be super accurate about these temperatures. I mean, there's not much difference between 100 degrees and 120. That's not a big difference, and these transmissions will warm up rapidly. You got to get this right. There is an official procedure, which I've discussed in a previous video, and we're going to run over it real quick, which you can do this accurately and correctly without having to use a scan tool. So to do the procedure, the official procedure from Toyota without using a scan tool, you're going to need to put a jumper cable on the OBD2 connector. That's the first step. This is very important that you get the right pins because then you could blow fuses, cause damage. So take your time, look at this diagram, and install your short pin. As you see in this picture, just use a little piece of wire, cut it, make sure it goes in the pins. Don't force them too much, just enough to make connection. Then we're going to move on to turn the key on, and you're going to see all the lights in the dash flashing as you see here. The next thing we will do is the car is in park and it is running. You're going to switch from park to neutral to drive to back to reverse. Kind of cycle it, reverse drive, just to cycle the fluid through the transmission, then put it back in park. And then you're going to go to neutral. You're going to go neutral drive while your foot's on the brake and the engine is running very quickly until the drive light comes on solid. On some of these trucks, it won't be the drive light, it'll be the automatic transmission fluid temperature, as you see in this picture. When you cycle the transmission shifter between neutral and drive very quickly, when that light comes on, you're going to put your truck in park, then pull the jumper out of the OBD2 connector. At this point, you are in fluid check mode. The fluid check mode will work as follows. When the light, whether it's the drive light or the AT temp light, when it is off, the temperature is too cold, wait for it to warm up. When the temperature is correct, the light will come on. Even though, like if it's the drive light, even though you're in park, you're going to see your indicator will read drive, or the drive light will come on. That means you're at the correct temperature. At this point, you're going to pull your drain plug, you're going to drain the excess fluid to adjust the fluid level. When you are at the correct fluid level, how you know this, you're going to get a trickle, as you see here. That trickle indicates your fluid is right at the level of that standpipe in the oil pan. At this point, you're going to install the plug for the overflow pipe on the trans pan, and life's good. Your fluid level is 100% correct. However, if your light starts flashing, that means you're over temperature. That means the temperature is over the specified level. And if you're following this method, it really doesn't matter what the temperature is. Don't worry about temperature, worry about the light, because the light will guide you. So it's really helpful to have a second helper sit in the car, do this while you're underneath the truck, ready to take that drain plug out. As soon as the light comes on, you're gonna open the drain plug, let the excess fluid. And just to clarify, this is not the drain plug that we use to drain the fluid. This is the second plug on the side to adjust the fluid. If you own a Tundra, Sequoia, or an LX570 with an external transmission cooler, these things will have a small thermostat on the passenger side of the transmission. You need to bypass that to get an accurate fluid level. In order to bypass it, you're just going to push that plunger with a screwdriver, put a little lock pin across. Life is good. You do that before you start the process of checking the transmission fluid level. A small tip on the pin to lock it in place. You could use a 1.5 millimeter Allen key. It works perfectly, it fits, and makes your life much easier. When you are done with your fluid level check and your fluid level is set, don't forget to pull that pin and release the plunger for the thermostat. One note about this whole process: you need to do this quick, and you need to do this in a very orderly fashion, because you only have very little time when the fluid is in the range. So it helps to practice this. Don't even drain the fluid, don't do anything. Just you come back home from work, you're gonna do this the next day. Practice this process. You could do this, it doesn't affect anything. Just watch how the light comes on, how it goes off. Practice this so you know what you are doing when you go to actually do it, because you have a very small window to adjust the fluid right. And a few notes that I want to clarify. When you are done moving from neutral to drive, and your light comes on, you're gonna go and park, and you're gonna leave the truck running. Do not shut it off, do not leave it in drive, neutral, whatever the case may be. You're gonna put it in park, then adjust your fluid level when the light comes on solid. Now, this seems extremely overcomplicated, but it's not. That's why I tell you, practice it. It is super simple, takes 5 seconds when you know what you are doing, when you've practiced it enough where you know. And yes, sure, you can measure the same amount, put it back at ambient temperature, but you know what? That's what differentiates the amateurs from our professionals. And professionals are you if you do this right and check the fluid level correct. Do the job right. Don't cut corners, especially not with your multi-$1,000 transmission that otherwise is bulletproof on Toyota trucks. I hope this video was helpful and informative. I hope this was not too confusing or too big of a process. It's actually very simple. Once you've done it once, you'll notice that it's nothing sealed about this transmission, and there's nothing overcomplicated about it. It's actually very simple. Sure, a dipstick would be easier, but this is very simple. Very simple. Don't be afraid of it. Replace your fluid every 60,000 miles or 6 years, and life is good. If you liked this video, consider giving it a thumbs up. If you're not a subscriber, consider subscribing to the channel. Check out some of my other videos. And until the next video, folks, may the Lord bless you and keep you, and you have yourself a wonderful day.